The morning sun cast long shadows across Naval Special Warfare Command Coronado as Lieutenant Commander Kaya, Ghostwing, Volkov stepped off the transport helicopter. Her flight suit bore the worn patches of a veteran pilot, 3 combat deployments, 47 confirmed saves, and a distinguished flying cross that she never talked about. The SEALs waiting on the tarmac exchanged glances, some smirking behind aviator sunglasses. Word had already spread through the teams. The Navy was sending a woman to their advanced combat training exercise. Not just any woman, a pilot, someone who lived in the sky while they owned the ground. What they didn't know was that Kaya Volkov had been born in the wreckage of her parents' military transport in Afghanistan 28 years ago. Delivered by an army medic during a firefight, she'd entered the world to the sound of rotors and gunfire. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd spent her entire career trying to perfect the very thing that had nearly killed her mother. The morning briefing would change everything, though none of them knew it yet. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus, Hammerhead, Rodriguez stood at the head of the briefing room, his weathered face betraying nothing as he watched the naval aviator take her seat among 32 of the Navy's most elite operators. The whispers were already starting, quiet jokes about flyboys and whether she'd cry during the first physical evolution. Rodriguez had seen enough combat to know better than to judge a warrior by their uniform, but even he wondered what Admiral Peterson was thinking, inserting a pilot into SEAL training protocols. The mission brief appeared on the tactical display, a simulated hostage rescue in urban terrain, complete with live-fire exercises and close-quarters combat scenarios designed to push even seasoned operators to their limits. Kaya studied the satellite imagery with the same intensity she'd once used to memorize target coordinates over Helmand Province. The building layouts, escape routes, potential sniper nests, her mind cataloged everything with mechanical precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "you'll be divided into 4-man teams for this exercise. Each team needs to demonstrate tactical proficiency, combat effectiveness, and unit cohesion under stress." His eyes found Kaya's. "Lieutenant Commander Volkov will be rotating through teams as an additional asset. Consider her integration part of the evaluation." The room fell silent. Through the windows, the Pacific stretched endlessly toward a horizon where 2 FA-18 Super Hornets traced contrails against the morning sky. Kaya watched them with the longing of a pilot grounded, remembering the weightless freedom of pulling 7GS at 30,000 feet. Soon, she'd be back where she belonged, in the cockpit, in control, in her element. But first, she had to prove something to these warriors who moved through shadows while she danced with clouds. Team Bravo's leader, Lieutenant Jake "Reaper" Morrison, glanced at his teammates with barely concealed annoyance. They trained together for 18 months, developed an almost telepathic communication style that kept them alive in the world's worst neighborhoods. Now they had to babysit a pilot who probably couldn't handle the recoil of an M4 carbine. Morrison had lost friends in Afghanistan when air support arrived too late, when pilots played it safe while ground forces bled. His jaw tightened as he watched Volkov adjust her tactical vest with movements that seemed almost too fluid, too practiced. The first evolution would be close-quarters combat, hand-to-hand fighting in a controlled environment where technique mattered more than firepower. Senior Chief Petty Officer David Anvil Kowalski stepped into the center of the training mat, 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and scar tissue earned through 15 years of special operations. He'd volunteered to demonstrate proper takedown techniques, assuming the newcomer would need extensive instruction before she could even attempt the basic movements. "Volkov, you're up first," Rodriguez called out. "Show us what they taught you in flight school." The laughter was immediate but brief. Kaya stepped onto the mat with the same confidence she'd shown walking to her FA-18 before night missions over hostile territory. Her stance was deceptive, relaxed, almost casual, with her hands at her sides like she was discussing weekend plans rather than preparing for combat. Anvil took his position across from her, his expression mixing professional courtesy with paternal concern. He'd go easy on her, make sure she didn't get hurt in front of the teams. The engagement lasted exactly 4 seconds. Anvil moved first, a standard grappling approach designed to control without causing injury. Kaya's response was a blur of precise movement. She slipped his grasp, pivoted on her right foot, and used his forward momentum to drive him face first into the mat with a technique so clean and brutal that even the most seasoned operators struggled to follow its mechanics. Anvil lay motionless for a heartbeat, then slowly pushed himself up, blood trickling from his nose. His expression transformed from condescension to something approaching respect. The silence in the training facility was absolute. 32 elite warriors sat frozen, their assumptions crumbling like poorly constructed buildings in an earthquake. Morrison's annoyed expression had been replaced by calculating interest. Rodriguez nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd suspected all along. Systema, someone whispered. The Russian martial art that turned human bodies into weapons through fluid motion and perfect timing. Kaya helped Anvil to his feet, her movements betraying no satisfaction or arrogance. Sorry, Senior Chief, you telegraphed the approach about half a second early. Her voice carried the same matter-of-fact tone she used reporting tactical information over radio. My father was Spetsnaz before he immigrated. He said American soldiers were too honest in combat. They announced their intentions. The room remained silent as Anvil wiped blood from his nose, his professional pride intact despite the demonstration. In his 15 years of special operations, he'd been dropped by experts in every martial art imaginable, but never with such surgical precision by someone who looked like she belonged in a cockpit rather than a fighting pit. Team Bravo's dynamic shifted imperceptibly. Morrison found himself reassessing not just the pilot's capabilities, but his own prejudices about warfare and the warriors who fought it. The woman standing before them wasn't just a pilot playing soldier. She was something else entirely, something that didn't fit into the neat categories they used to organize their world. Her call sign suddenly made more sense: Ghostwing. Something that appeared and disappeared without warning, striking with lethal precision before vanishing into the vast emptiness of sky. The next evolution would test marksmanship under stress, a timed course of fire with multiple targets at varying distances, all while wearing full tactical gear in 90-degree heat. Kaya accepted the M4 carbine from the armorer, her hands moving with the unconscious competence of someone who'd maintained weapon systems worth $60 million. The rifle felt different from the controls of her Super Hornet, but the principles remained the same: smooth movements, controlled breathing, and the absolute focus that separated professionals from amateurs. The course began with close-range targets, simulated hostiles emerging from doorways and windows in a mock urban environment. The sound of suppressed gunfire echoed through the facility as Team Bravo moved through their designated lanes, each operator demonstrating the marksmanship skills that had kept them alive in the world's most dangerous places. Morrison cleared his section with the mechanical efficiency that had earned him his call sign, every shot placed with surgical precision in the center mass of paper targets. Kaya's lane was different. Her shooting position seemed almost relaxed, the rifle an extension of her body rather than a separate tool requiring conscious manipulation. Each shot was placed with the same cold precision she'd shown in hand-to-hand combat. No wasted motion, no unnecessary displays of speed or aggression. When the course ended, the target analysis revealed something that made even Rodriguez raise an eyebrow. 24 shots fired, 24 hits in the high-scoring zones, with a spread pattern that could be covered by a silver dollar. Outstanding shooting, Lieutenant Commander, Rodriguez acknowledged. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? My mother, Kaya replied, her voice carrying the first hint of emotion anyone had heard from her. She was a Marine sniper before she transferred to transport aviation. Said that flying and shooting were both about hitting what you're aiming for, whether it's a target or a landing zone under fire. The mention of her mother brought a subtle change to the room's atmosphere. These men understood loss, understood the weight of family legacy in military service. Morrison found himself curious about this woman's story, about the experiences that had shaped her into someone who could move between worlds, the ethereal realm of aviation and the brutal reality of ground combat, with equal competence. As the day progressed through urban warfare scenarios, each evolution revealed new facets of Kaya's capabilities. During the hostage rescue simulation, she demonstrated an intuitive understanding of room-clearing techniques, moving through confined spaces with the spatial awareness of someone accustomed to navigating three-dimensional environments. Her tactical radio communication was crisp and professional, free of the chatter that often plagued joint operations between different military specialties. But it was during the final evolution, a simulated helicopter insertion under fire, that everything changed. The scenario called for Team Bravo to fast-rope from a hovering U-60 Black Hawk into a hostile landing zone, then advance to an objective while under simulated enemy fire. It was a standard insertion technique, practiced thousands of times by special operations units worldwide. The helicopter approached the drop zone at 60 feet, rotors beating the air with mechanical thunder that vibrated through every bone in their bodies. Morrison was first on the rope, followed by his teammates in rapid succession. They hit the ground and immediately established a defensive perimeter, waiting for their pilot asset to join them. The seconds stretched into a full minute, then two. Rodriguez's voice crackled over their radios. "Bravo team, what's your status on the pilot?" Morrison keyed his microphone, scanning the empty sky above them. "No sign of her, Master Chief. She must have frozen up during the approach." The judgment was immediate and harsh. Combat zones had no room for hesitation, no tolerance for operators who couldn't perform when lives hung in the balance. Even the most understanding military professionals would question a pilot's combat effectiveness after failing a basic insertion. Morrison felt a mixture of disappointment and vindication. His initial skepticism had been proven correct. Then they heard the sound that changed everything. From somewhere behind the opposing force positions came the distinctive crack of precision rifle fire, not the rapid bursts of automatic weapons, but the measured cadence of a marksman engaging targets with deliberate intent. The simulated enemy fire directed at Team Bravo suddenly ceased, replaced by confused shouting from the exercise controllers. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio with poorly concealed amazement. "Bravo team, be advised that all opposing force positions have been neutralized by unknown sniper fire. Exercise controllers are trying to locate the shooter." Morrison raised his binoculars and scanned the surrounding terrain, looking for any sign of movement in the elevated positions that ringed the exercise area. His teammates did the same, their professional curiosity overriding any tactical concerns. In 15 minutes of searching, they found nothing. No muzzle flashes, no movement, no indication of where the shots had originated. It wasn't until Rodriguez called the exercise complete that they understood what had happened. Kaya emerged from a concealed position nearly 800 meters from the landing zone, carrying a borrowed sniper rifle and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who just solved a complex tactical problem. She'd never intended to fast rope with the team. Instead, she'd studied the exercise parameters and identified a way to neutralize the opposing force from a distance, eliminating the threat before Team Bravo ever reached the objective. "Unorthodox," Rodriguez commented as she returned the rifle to the armorer. "Care to explain your tactical thinking, Lieutenant Commander?" "Aviation is about seeing the bigger picture," Kaya replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who just proven a point without trying. "Ground forces focus on what's directly in front of them, which is necessary for survival. Pilots see the entire battlefield from above. When I studied the exercise scenario, the optimal solution wasn't to join the ground assault. It was to eliminate the threat from a position the opposing force couldn't anticipate. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet after her combat demonstration. This was the silence of professionals recognizing expertise, of warriors acknowledging a level of tactical thinking they hadn't expected from someone outside their specialty. Morrison found himself reassessing not just Kaya's capabilities, but the fundamental assumptions about how different military specialties approached combat problems. As the sun began to set over Coronado, painting the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson, Team Bravo gathered their equipment and prepared for the after-action review. The day had challenged their preconceptions about pilots, about women in combat roles, and about the nature of warfare itself. Rodriguez watched them with the satisfaction of an instructor who'd seen his students learn something valuable, something that couldn't be taught through conventional training methods. The evening briefing room felt different now. The casual dismissal and barely concealed mockery had been replaced by professional curiosity and grudging respect. Kaya sat among the SEALs with the same quiet confidence she'd displayed all day, but now her presence carried weight. She'd earned her place through demonstrated competence rather than political correctness or diversity initiatives. Outstanding performance today, Rodriguez began, his eyes moving across the assembled operators. You've all demonstrated the tactical flexibility and adaptive thinking that defines special operations. But today's exercises also highlighted something important about joint operations and the value of different perspectives in combat planning. Morrison found himself studying Kaya's profile as she listened to the debrief, noting the small scar above her left eyebrow and the way her hands remained perfectly still, while others fidgeted with equipment or took notes. There was something about her stillness that reminded him of snipers he'd worked with, a quality of patient, predatory awareness that suggested she was always processing information, always calculating angles and distances and possibilities. The integration of aviation assets with ground forces isn't just about transportation or fire support, Rodriguez continued. It's about combining different tactical perspectives to create solutions that neither specialty could develop independently. Today's exercises demonstrated that principle in action. The compliment was subtle but unmistakable. Kaya had proven herself not through brute force or showmanship, but through the quiet competence that defined true professionals. She'd identified problems, developed solutions, and executed them with the surgical precision that kept military personnel alive in hostile environments. As the formal debrief concluded, Team Bravo found themselves approaching Kaya with questions about her training background, her combat experience, and the techniques she demonstrated. The conversation was tentative at first. These were men unaccustomed to seeking tactical advice from pilots, but her responses revealed a depth of knowledge that transcended service boundaries. The system of training came from my father, she explained, accepting a cup of coffee from Morrison with a slight nod of acknowledgement. He immigrated from Russia when I was 12, but he never stopped being Spetsnaz. Said that American military training was excellent for teaching soldiers to fight, but Russian training taught soldiers to survive. There's a difference. The distinction resonated with men who'd spent their careers in the gray areas between conventional warfare and special operations. Survival wasn't just about winning tactical engagements. It was about reading situations, adapting to unexpected circumstances, and making decisions that kept everyone alive long enough to complete the mission. "What about the shooting?" asked Petty Officer First Class Tommy Razor Chen, Team Bravo's designated marksman. That grouping on the range was sniper quality. Kaya's expression shifted slightly, revealing the first hint of something deeper than professional competence. My mother taught me to shoot before she deployed to Afghanistan. She said that flying was beautiful, but shooting was survival, that pilots who couldn't defend themselves on the ground were just expensive targets waiting to be captured or killed. The weight of family legacy hung in the air between them. These men understood the burden of living up to parents who'd served with distinction, of carrying forward traditions that had been paid for with blood and sacrifice. Morrison found himself wondering about Kaya's mother, about the experiences that had shaped a woman who'd served as both a Marine sniper and a transport pilot. She didn't make it back, Kaya added quietly, her voice carrying the controlled emotion of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize grief for the sake of mission effectiveness. Shot down over Helmand Province when I was 16. The crash investigation said she diverted from her planned route to provide emergency medical evacuation for a squad that was pinned down by enemy fire. Saved 8 Marines before her bird took an RPG. The revelation changed everything. Suddenly, Kaya's drive toward aviation made perfect sense. She wasn't just following in her mother's footsteps. She was continuing a mission that had been interrupted by enemy action. Every flight, every combat sortie, every moment in the cockpit was both a tribute to her mother's sacrifice and a continuation of her mother's war. That's where the call sign came from, Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carrying the respect reserved for those who'd earned their place through blood rather than politics. Ghostwing, like her mother's spirit flying alongside her. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet that had marked the day's earlier revelations. This was the silence of warriors acknowledging one of their own, of professionals recognizing someone who belonged in their ranks not because of what she could do, but because of why she did it. The day had begun with skepticism and ended with something approaching reverence. As Team Bravo prepared to leave the briefing room, Morrison found himself walking beside Kaya toward the exit. The corridors of the Naval Special Warfare Command were quiet now, filled with the institutional echoes of a military facility winding down after a training day. Through the windows, the lights of Coronado gleamed against the darkness of the Pacific. "Question," Morrison said, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than challenge. "You could have told us about your background from the beginning. Might have saved everyone some time and attitude adjustment." Kaya paused at the exit, her hand on the door handle, and turned to face him with an expression that was neither defensive nor apologetic. "Would it have mattered? You would have been expecting me to be something other than what I am. This way, you judged me on performance rather than story." The answer revealed a tactical intelligence that extended beyond combat situations into the complex politics of military service. She'd understood from the beginning that her acceptance by the SEALs would depend not on her family history or her personal motivations, but on her ability to contribute to mission success. Everything else was background noise. "Besides," she added with the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her all day, "my father always said that the best way to earn a Russian's respect was to beat them in a fight first, then buy them a drink afterward. Americans aren't that different." Morrison found himself laughing despite his exhaustion and the fundamental shift in his worldview that the day had produced. The woman walking beside him had proven herself in every category that mattered to special operations personnel: tactical competence, physical courage, and the kind of quiet professionalism that kept everyone alive when the situation turned ugly. As they stepped into the California night, the sound of jet engines echoed across the base, night training flights preparing for missions that would take them to places where American interests were defended by people like the ones they'd trained with today. Kaya paused to listen, her head tilted slightly toward the sound with the unconscious attention of someone whose heart belonged in the sky. "You miss it," Morrison observed, following her gaze toward the navigation lights moving across the darkness. "Every day," she admitted, her voice carrying a longing that transcended professional duty. "But this was important. Understanding how different specialties think, how ground forces approach problems. It makes me better at my job when I'm providing close air support or extraction under fire." The night air carried the salt smell of the Pacific and the lingering odor of gunpowder from the day's exercises. In the distance, the lights of San Diego created a glow against the horizon that reminded Morrison of other cities in other countries, where he'd worked alongside aviators who'd risked their lives to bring his team home safely. The professional relationship between pilots and ground forces was built on mutual dependence and absolute trust, qualities that couldn't be taught through classroom instruction or simulated in training exercises. "When's your next deployment?" Morrison asked as they reached the parking area where his team had left their vehicles. "3 weeks," Kaya replied, checking her watch with the automatic gesture of someone whose life was governed by flight schedules and mission timelines. "Carrier deployment to the Persian Gulf. 6 months of providing close air support for ground operations, search and rescue, and whatever else comes up." The deployment would take her back to the same region where her mother had died, where American military personnel continued to face the same threats and challenges that had claimed so many lives over the past 2 decades. Morrison understood the weight of that assignment, the way deployments could become both professional obligations and personal reckonings with family history. "If you ever need ground support coordination or tactical advice from someone who's been there," he offered, pulling a business card from his wallet, "my team works with aviators on a regular basis. We know what it's like when everything goes wrong and the only thing between you and disaster is someone in an aircraft who's willing to take risks." Kaya accepted the card with the same careful attention she'd given everything else throughout the day. "I appreciate that. And if you ever need someone to explain how the war looks from 30,000 feet, or why pilots sometimes make decisions that seem crazy from ground level, I'm available for consultation." The exchange was more than professional courtesy. It was recognition of mutual competence and shared commitment to mission success. Both understood that modern military operations required integration across specialties, that the most effective combat units were those that leveraged different perspectives and capabilities rather than protecting parochial interests. As Morrison climbed into his truck and watched Kaya walk toward her own vehicle, he reflected on the day's lessons about assumptions, prejudices, and the dangerous tendency to underestimate people who didn't fit conventional categories. The woman who dropped Anvil in 4 seconds and eliminated an entire opposing force from 800 meters was heading back to her quarters to prepare for another deployment to one of the world's most dangerous neighborhoods. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Commander Kaya Ghostwing Volkov would strap herself into an FA-18 Super Hornet and launch from the deck of an aircraft carrier into skis, where her mother's ghost waited among the contrails and radio chatter of another generation's war. The lessons she'd learned at Coronado, about ground tactics, about earning respect through performance, about the value of different perspectives in combat planning, would serve her well in the months ahead. But that night, as she drove through the quiet streets of Coronado toward her temporary quarters, Kaya allowed herself to remember the satisfaction of proving her worth to warriors who measured value in competence rather than politics. The day had begun with skepticism and ended with professional respect. Exactly the outcome her Spetsnaz father and Marine sniper mother would have expected from their daughter. The war continued, in training facilities and forward operating bases, in aircraft carriers and mountain outposts, wherever American military personnel carried forward the missions that previous generations had begun. And somewhere in that vast enterprise of organized violence and strategic deterrence, a pilot named Ghostwing prepared to join her mother among the warriors whose sacrifices purchased security for people who would never know their names. The story had no ending because the mission never ended. Each deployment, each training exercise, each moment of professional competence was part of a larger narrative about duty, sacrifice, and the price of freedom in a dangerous world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove worth through performance, new chances to honor the legacy of those who'd served before. Tonight, though, was for rest and preparation, for the quiet satisfaction that came from earning respect through demonstrated competence rather than inherited privilege. The SEALs had thought she couldn't fight, and she'd proven them wrong in the most direct way possible, not through argument or complaint, but through the simple application of superior skills in controlled circumstances. In the end, that was all any warrior could do: show up prepared, perform when tested, and let the results speak for themselves. Everything else was just conversation.